What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the LTL podcast. It is August 1st, 2023, and this is episode 45, and I want to welcome everybody back. Can you believe that it is August already? It's already August of 2023. Unbelievable. We had an action-packed day out on Long Island. Rex Heuermann had his first day in a Long Island courtroom facing his charges there, and 3 victims, I believe now a 4th. There's a prime suspect in a 4th as well. So I want to welcome everybody into the room here as the chat fills in. Let me do a little housekeeping here really quick before we get into the heart of the show. Just for all my new viewers, just to let you all know, what we do here is a live podcast pretty much every night. And then what I'll do is a couple of days later, I will download those episodes and re-upload them. The reason I do that is because I don't have a lot of time to do short form content right now. So re-uploading my episodes, relaunching them for a replay, it gives the opportunity for my subscribers to go back and watch them. If not, what it actually does is push the episode further out into the algorithm to bring in new subscribers. So that's why I download these episodes and re-upload them. So if you're here live in the chat, you'll have the opportunity on the right-hand side of the screen to chat along with us. Please fill up the chat. We love having conversation during the show. And then, of course, if you're watching this on a replay, what I always ask my subscribers to do is just go down there in the comments section and smash or write hashtag replay. So just a few bits of housekeeping, but we'll move on with the show. So as I was saying here, suspected Gilgo, I said it right this time, beach killer Rex Heuermann gives off icy stare in court as prosecutors hand off massive amount of evidence. And we're going to talk about the amount of digital evidence they handed over to for this case. And that's something that we're going to get into a little later, because there's going to be a parallel here with Bryan Kohberger's case, but we'll wait for that a little later in the episode. So as we move on here, August 1st, 2023, this came out at 4:12 p.m. and it's from the New York Post. Goes into saying, accused Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann appeared in a Long Island courtroom Tuesday with a chilling gaze as prosecutors dumped a massive amount of evidence in his lap. Suffolk County prosecutors said a brief court appearance is just the beginning of what promises to be a lengthy criminal case, with Heuermann's lawyers handed 8. How many? 8 terabytes of evidence to review. 8. Okay. Interesting. 8 terabytes of evidence to review. Let's think about another case that we follow very, very closely. And maybe I'll ask the chat here. How many terabytes were released in the Bryan Kohberger case? Type it in the chat. How many terabytes were turned over as evidence in the Bryan Kohberger case? I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait a couple more. I want to see the chat a little bit more here. We'll wait a second. Look at the 51s. Now there's only 8 terabytes. 8 terabytes in this case, in a 13-year-old case. 8 terabytes of information. Let me give you some perspective of what just 5 terabytes of information holds. Just 5. Okay? I asked the question to Google, is 5 terabytes a lot of storage? Expansive storage space. A 5 terabyte hard disk can hold up to an estimated 83,000 MP3 music files, 1,250 full-length movies or 160,000 digital photos, which is ample storage for most average users. 8 terabytes were turned over in this case. In Brian Kohberger's case, 51 terabytes. 51 terabytes were turned over. Now, that gives you a perspective of the amount of evidence that is in the Kohberger case. 51 terabytes. I'm going to tell you this. I'm staring at my 8 terabyte hard drive right now, okay? And all that stores is, and what is on that terabyte, on that drive, is 3 years of content of my YouTube channel. 3 years, and I probably have only used 2 terabytes, if that, out of that whole disk drive space. So that gives you some perspective. They only turned over 8 terabytes of evidence for this case and 51 terabytes in the Brian Kohberger case. All right, we'll keep reading on here. So this is a 13-year case. So as you see, we have a great deal of information, evidence, photographs to support, to provide to the defense counsel, Suffolk DA Raymond, I think it's Tierney, told reporters outside the courthouse. We've begun the process, and that is just the beginning, he said. We're going to continue to do that on a rolling basis. Heuermann, 59, is charged with murder in the deaths of 3 women whose bodies found dumped along the Gilgo beach in December 2010. He is also a prime suspect in a 4th death of a woman, Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Heuermann, also architect of Heuermann, an architect from Massapequa Park, was arrested on July 13th outside Midtown Manhattan offices and is being held in Suffolk County Jail without bail. Facing a judge for a second time in a case Tuesday, the hulking suspect, his hair matted down at one point, scanned the audience with an icy stare as if he was looking for someone, and he looks pissed. He didn't speak during the proceeding, to which he wore a blue shirt, a black suit jacket paired with khaki pants with a grenade pocket on the side, and he was handcuffed in the front. And you can see some photos here. Massive man, huge, massive man. And those cuffs are just super tight around those huge hands. His hands were handcuffed in the front, the caption says, and you can see it here. Big, giant man. Some of the victims' relatives were in court, though Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerp, who has said she was shocked by the arrest and since filed for divorce, was not among those in the audience. Suffolk County and state police descended on the accused killer's house, forwarding his address, combining through the property, including by bringing in an excavator to dig up the background to search for a body parts, or trophies. And you can see the courthouse outside, members of the court. That's the defense attorney. Authorities said they found a walk-in vault in the basement and removed nearly 300 weapons from the home, but it did not say if it had any significant evidence to recover. Europe has her Ellerp and her 2 children, Christopher and Victoria, returned to their home last week after police concluded their search, only to find it in shambles, she told the Post Monday. So I'm not going to go too much in here because we do know a little bit of the background of what's going in this case, but I do want to bring this up just to do a little bit of a review. And this is from the Daily Mail. But I want to talk about, just so everybody has that perspective again, okay? Just to give everybody that perspective if they're just coming into the room. So the article that I just read, if you missed it, 8 terabytes of evidence was turned over to the from the DA. 8 evidence, a 13-year case, 8 terabytes of, I'll get all these numbers right, 8 terabytes of evidence when I compare this to Brian Kohberger, 51 terabytes of information, of evidence were turned over in Brian Kohberger's case. There's the parallel. There's the parallel in this. And this is like, for the people that think like there's not enough evidence, I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a shit load of evidence in the Brian Kohberger case. I think that we've only seen between 1 and 5 to 10% of what we've heard and seen so far. There is going to be multitudes of photos, multitudes of video, multitudes of documents. 51 terabytes is ridiculous amount of evidence. All right, let's pull this up from the Daily Mail. And this is a little bit of review to get us a review back on the case. We'll play.
Rex Heuermann. I'm an architect. I'm an architectural consultant. I'm a troubleshooter. Born and raised on Long Island.
Okay.
Been working in Manhattan since 1987.
After more than a decade, police have finally arrested the man they believe is the Long Island serial killer, also known as the Gilgo Beach Killer. True crime community has been obsessed with this unsolved case, and allegedly so has the guy arrested for the killings, Rex Heuermann. Police uncovered hundreds of searches on his computer about this case.
What the defendant was searching. In a 14-month period, he had over 200 searches pertaining to the Gilgo investigation. He was searching, compulsively searching pictures of the victims, but not only pictures of the victims, pictures of their relatives. And he was trying to locate those individuals. In addition to that, there was a lot of torture, porn, and what you would consider depictions of women being abused, being raped, and being killed.
The 59-year-old architect was taken into custody on July 13th at his Midtown Manhattan office and has been charged with the murders of Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. The bodies of the 3 victims, along with one other, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, were found over the course of 2 days in 2010, within a quarter mile of each other along a stretch of highway in Long Island. They would become known as the Gilgo Beach Four. Heuermann has been indicted for the murders of 3 of the victims and is the prime suspect in the 4th. These cases had gone cold for years, but in 2022, a new task force was formed with the express purpose of finding the Long Island serial killer. And at a press conference, police did not mince words when it came to describing the man they arrested.
Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks among us, a predator that ruined families.
So how did this, quote, predator live and function for all these years without raising suspicion? Well, pretty successfully. Heuermann's arrest came as a huge shock to a lot of people who know him. The Long Island native is an imposing man. He's somewhere between 6'4" and 6'6", weighs more than 250 pounds, but he's been described by several people as being affable. Coworkers even nicknamed him Peter Griffin after the Family Guy character. And a colleague described him to Fox News Digital as patient and goofy, meticulous with his work. Heuermann was the president of his own architecture firm in New York City, so pretty successful, and his 26-year-old daughter, Victoria, worked for him. At least outwardly, Heuermann appeared to be a family man. He's married, and along with Victoria, he and his wife, Asa, have a special needs son. Now, not a lot is known about Asa. She's kept a pretty low profile so far. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows describing this guy. Trust me. A colleague who wished to remain anonymous told the New York Post that the murder suspect once spoke about the Gilgo Beach killings and allegedly questioned why the murderer would use a burlap net to dispose of the bodies. And a neighbor also told Fox that he was a bit of an oddball. But if you ask law enforcement, Heuermann is as depraved as it comes. I mean, you heard them earlier. They believe he's a predator. And in court documents, they presented evidence that they hope will prove it in a court of law. Here is some of the most disturbing information that investigators discovered while they were digging into Rex Heuermann. A grand jury was convened, and through that grand jury, the LISC task force was able to obtain hundreds of subpoenas. Many of them were to search Heuermann's digital footprint, which police say he tried to hide through fake burner phones and emails. Law enforcement says Heuermann frequently communicated with and hired sex workers, even up until recently. He also had a Tinder profile connected to a burner email where he used a fake name, but seemed to use his real photos. But it was his online searches that are the most disturbing. Cops say the suspect conducted thousands of searches for sex workers, sadistic, torture-related pornography, and child pornography. His search terms are enough to make anybody cringe. Some of them are truly repugnant, and just a warning, if you look them up, the content of these searches are very dark. But some of the more mild ones included mature escorts Manhattan, but the majority of them involved sexual violence, particularly against young girls. And he also seemed to be obsessed with the Long Island serial killer case. His alleged searches included podcasts and documentaries about Lisk, updates on the case, and why it hadn't been solved. Let me read a few to you. 1. Why could law enforcement not trace the calls made by the Long Island serial killer? 2. Why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught?
It's crazy.
And the last one. In Long Island serial killer investigation, new phone technology may be key to break-in case.
Wow.
Now, he also searched the names of the victims and their close relatives and viewed hundreds of photos of those victims, the Gilgo Beach 4. Police said he looked at the images compulsively. One of his other alleged searches was for John Dittroff. That's a convicted killer who was once suspected of actually being Lisk. Now, the searches were all done in connection with a burner email account, and police say that at the time of his arrest, he had a burner phone on him that was connected to one of those emails. I mentioned earlier that this case had been cold for about a decade and only heated up once that task force was created in 2022 and the Gilgo murders became a priority. Prior to that, there had been widespread criticism of law enforcement and their handling of the case. Now, these victims had all been first reported missing, and investigators are accused of basically putting the cases on the back burner because they were sex workers. A local reporter for the Long Island Press penned this scathing headline a few weeks before the bodies of those missing women would be found dead. Lost girls. When women go missing on Long Island, some matter, prostitutes don't. But once the task force was formed last year, it only took 6 weeks for Heuermann's name to come up for the first time. And the task force was pretty intricate. Investigators, lawyers, forensics, the FBI, different police departments, all working together to solve this case. But the key to understanding how the task force honed in on their suspect, we have to look at the crimes themselves. Specifically, how were the victims chosen? How did the killer interact with them? How were they killed and then disposed of? And finally, what did the killer do after?
Absolutely wild.
The disappearance of 23-year-old Shannon Gilbert was the catalyst to the whole Long Island serial killer case, despite the fact that she isn't believed to be a Lisk victim. Like the other victims, Shannon was a sex worker. In 2010, she traveled from her home in New Jersey with her usual driver, who sort of served as her protection. He brought her to a remote neighborhood in Long Island to meet up with a John. Now, she ends up disappearing under mysterious circumstances. Shannon's case is a complicated one, and diving too deep into it will only serve to really confuse matters, as tragic as it was. She did die, likely that night, but her death has been ruled as accidental. But the reason it is significant to the Lisk cases, despite her not being a Lisk victim, is because an off-duty detective was searching for her with his police dog, kind of doing a search exercise. His name was Blue, and Blue alerted him to human remains. That is when the first Lisk victim was found. Now, when that first set of remains was discovered, cops immediately believed that they had finally located Shannon. Only they hadn't. The body was identified as another missing sex worker, Melissa Bartholomew. 3 more bodies, all sex workers, all petite women, would be discovered the next day in that same area of Gilgo Beach. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. The victims were all disposed of in the same way. Their bodies were bound at the head, midsection, and feet, and they were wrapped in a camouflage burlap, the type that you would use for duck hunting. The corpses were all in various states of decay, indicating that they were not killed at the same time, but there was physical evidence left on the bodies of these women. At this point, it was clear to law enforcement that they had a serial killer on their hands. Murdering sex workers, unfortunately, is nothing new. Women in this vulnerable community are often preyed upon because their disappearances can go unnoticed or simply ignored by law enforcement and even sometimes their families. But it's important to note here that the disappearances of the Gilgo Beach 4 did not go unnoticed by their friends and family. Now, something else they all had in common was not only were they all engaged in sex work, but they were all working independently, advertising their services on places like Craigslist and Backpage, which is how police believe they were first targeted by the killer. And when I say working independently, I mean they weren't working for escort services or a pimp. And when sex workers do work independently in order to protect themselves, they usually have a protocol that they follow and some sort of backup in the form of a driver or someone they pay a little money to watch out for them nearby. According to the podcast Lisk, who spoke with multiple people connected to the victims, it seems several of the victims broke with their usual safety protocol on the day they went missing. Now, this seems to indicate a level of comfort with the John who had hired them. And there has long been speculation that Lisk was either a high-profile member of the community or a member of law enforcement, 2 groups that would make the women feel comfortable enough to forego their usual safety measures with the assumption that these men wouldn't risk their reputation to harm them. Now, that's clearly not the case with Rex Heuermann. He is most certainly not a member of law enforcement. A more likely scenario is that the killer was either a repeat client who they were already comfortable with, or that they offered them a sum of money they couldn't refuse. Police believe Maureen Brainerd Barnes was killed in 2007, making her the first of the 4 Gilgo Beach victims. Her body was bound with several leather belts, and 2 female hairs were discovered on one of them. Now, the other victims had been bound by duct tape, and again, female hairs not belonging to the victims were found on 2 of those victims, and on one, a male hair. Problem was, at the time, because of how long these corpses had been decomposing in the elements, the hairs were too degraded to test for DNA. Technology has since caught up, and forensic analysts were able to use mitochondrial DNA testing to determine that the female hairs found on the victims belonged to Rex Heuermann's wife.
Oh, wow.
Additionally, one male hair was also discovered on the bottom of one of those burlap sacks, and that was determined to belong to Rex Heuermann himself.
Wow.
Investigators wrote in court documents, "It is likely that the burlap, tape, vehicles, or other instrumentalities used in the furtherance of these murders came from defendant Heuermann's residence, where his wife also resides, or was transferred from his clothing." In order to test that mitochondrial DNA from the hair against the Heuermanns, people needed to obtain their DNA.
The pizza.
Cops had trailed Rex for quite some time once they had set their sights on him as their prime suspect. Police obtained 11 bottles from the trash outside of the Heuermanns' home in Massapequa and were able to obtain DNA from Asa, Rex's wife. They ended up getting Rex's DNA off of a discarded pizza crust, which was thrown in its box in a trash can on the street near his office in Manhattan. And according to law enforcement, the DNA tests came back with more than a 96% chance that the samples of hair taken from the bodies of the victims belonged to the Heuermanns. Now, if you're wondering why the suspect's wife has not been implicated in the crimes, well, for at least 3 of the murders, police have evidence that she was either out of the country or out of the state. It's their working theory that the Long Island serial killer was active when his own family was out of town.
Makes
Now,
sense.
the DNA matching is obviously getting evidence, but it's certainly not enough. In order for the task force to find Rex in the first place, they used a database that essentially triangulated phone calls that were made to the victims before their disappearance, phone calls made from the victims' phones while they were missing, and phone calls made to the family members of some of the victims after they had disappeared.
Yeah, right.
Way back when the bodies were first discovered and the victims were identified, police learned that the killer taunted the younger sister of Melissa, Bartholomew, who was just 15 at the time. The calls were never long enough for police to trace an exact location, but they were able to discover the vicinity where the calls were made. And that's how they learned that the calls were made from a burner phone, both in Massapequa and in Midtown Manhattan. And according to law enforcement, they later found out that their suspect exclusively uses burner phones and burner emails to hire and communicate with sex workers, to search for disturbing pornography, and to search for information and updates about the Long Island serial killer case. Law enforcement writes, quote, "These burner phones and email accounts with fictitious identities were used in an effort to conceal Heuermann's true identity, conceal his criminal activity, unlawfully proposition sex workers, and attempt to monitor the investigation of his crimes." Police also said that the suspect allegedly used a new burner phone for each of the murders.
We also went back and looked at his cell site records, and we compared his personal cell site records with that of the 4 target phones, and we saw that there was areas of commonality.
So the task force has what they're referring to as an area of interest where these burner phones were being used. They also had a rough physical description of the killer from an eyewitness.
That individual was identified as a person who was between 6'4" and 6'6", a large man, thickly built, not necessarily overly muscular, but just a naturally big person with glasses, white, and dark hair.
That eyewitness also identified a very distinctive pickup truck as belonging to the killer. It was an early model Chevrolet Avalanche, and after some digging, police discovered that Rex Heuermann had that exact truck registered to him. Now, if you are at all familiar with this case prior to this recent arrest, you know that the 4 bodies of the Gilgo Beach victims are not the only bodies that have been found along that stretch of highway in Long Island. 6 other bodies were found in the same area between 2010 and 2011, so not long after those first 4 women were discovered. The way they were found and how their bodies were disposed of doesn't fit the same being investigated in connection with Rex Heuermann. And as I mentioned earlier, he is still the prime suspect in the 4th Gilgo Beach victim's death, Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Police expect that investigation to be wrapping up soon, likely with more charges. But for now, Rex Heuermann was arraigned on 3 first-degree murder charges and 3 second-degree murder charges and has pleaded not guilty. According to his lawyer, Rex broke down in tears and told his attorney he didn't do it. Now, despite the long journey it's taken to get an arrest in this case, law enforcement says the investigation is really only beginning now. Trucks of evidence were seen being taken out of Rex Heuermann's Massapequa home, as well as multiple storage facilities belonging to him. And it is notable that none of the former victims were found clothed or with their belongings. So those items are out there somewhere.
Doubt he's going to confess.
An interior designer who used to work with Rex and went to his home in 2005 to help with a kitchen renovation exclusively told Daily Mail that there was a locked room in the basement. And when she asked about it, Rex was, quote, so weird, and allegedly told her it was full of guns. And a source close to the investigation told CNN that somewhere between 200 and 300 firearms were allegedly removed from Rex's home. As for the open investigations into those 6 victims, also found on Ocean Parkway, well, I will dive into those next week, so come back for the latest. And for more true crime content like this, hit like and subscribe.
All right. Let's hear about some of those strange phone calls that were going on. He is an attorney that was getting strange phone calls, taunting phone calls.
Let's go one step further. A lawyer representing 2 victims found on Gilgo Beach, not charged in the Rex Heuermann case at this point. His name's John Ray, and he represents Shannon Gilbert and Jessica Taylor's families. And just as recently as January of this year, he got taunting phone calls from a man and a woman's voices in the background, playing 10-year-old news clips of when his clients' loved ones were found dead and saying vulgar things in the background. And John Ray thinks it might just have been Rex Heuermann, and he joins me live now. John, can you describe what was in those phone calls? What happened when you picked up the phone on these phone calls? What'd you hear?
Well, I'm not sure who it was, but a man called at about 1:30 in the morning, and he spoke very weirdly, played some very strange music, made a noise, he's scratching noises, and then showed a clip of a reporter reporting on Gilgo Beach back from 2012 in that time, and then spoke. Now, our daughter...
It's almost like Zodiac killer shit. You know, it's like what the Zodiac killer did. He was calling news stations and allegedly taunting. You know, they thought that was the Zodiac killer. If you ever seen the movie, there's a part where he calls into a TV station and does this taunting calls. It's very interesting.
Or had gone to...
and he was calling 911, you know, and telling them, you know, where to find the bodies and stuff. It's crazy.
Another state had been in San Diego, and she had left in all blue because she was a runner, a race walker. And that's where she was going, to race walk with trainers that train in the Olympics. She's 18 years old. First time away from the house in her whole life from her parents. And the man speaking said he described a girl in blue, and he mentioned that she was in California, and she was by a window, and our daughter was right by a window and climbed out the window with a cell phone in her hand. And it just completely transfixed us. 5 seconds later, he called her mother and did exactly the same thing. It was all taped. It was all very well thought out and carefully prepared. In March, I get home late at night. I work hard. You know, I usually eat dinner around 9 o'clock. So it's an unusual time. I get home. We're in a house with a lot of windows in the dark, surrounded by forest, and up on a hill. And I'm eating. I just start to eat with my family. Same guy calls, same pattern that I just described with the playing of the Gilgo Beach. And this time he says, I hope you're enjoying your dinner. And then says, and I hope you're going to enjoy eating your pizza. With that, within 5 seconds later, the doorbell rings, and Domino's pizza delivery man was there with 3 pizzas standing there. Wow. We did not order any pizzas. So when we called the police and we called Domino's Pizza, to find out how the call came in. And they said, the Domino's man said it was a woman who called in with a man in the background speaking and acting like they were ordering, you know, pineapples and ham on the pizza, that sort of thing. So, and they somehow convinced them to send the pizzas over without paying for them. It apparently had something to do with my telephone number that they had. So this was absolutely paralyzing, because we know for that to happen, he had to have been surveilling us through our windows. It was very scary.
But it's scaring me. Just hearing this story is frightening to me, John. After reporting it to the police, and now since the arrest of Rex Heuermann, have you had any further contact with the police to see if perhaps they've now been able to trace, because they've done a lot of work on his phones, to trace and see if any of those phone calls to you were made by him? And if not, do you think it's Rex?
I don't know if it's this fellow, but when I and her mother were at the arraignment of this man, the Tyrannosaurus.
Oh, I'm so glad you came in, C. So listen to this one. The poster is sitting in Spokane, Washington, in a mailroom, and they said it will never, ever get delivered to me. That is ridiculous, and it's crazy, and I apologize, but I appreciate your efforts to try to get it here. It's kind of a shame, but it's just so weird that I believe the first one was turned around and sent back to you. You sent out the second one, and it's literally sitting in a post office in Spokane, Washington, and they said it will never get delivered. It's insane. So thank you for your efforts. I appreciate it. If you ever need me to PayPal you the postage, let me know. Email me. I will reimburse your postage. So I want to just let you know what was going on. They literally just said it's just sitting there. It's sitting there. There's no reason. They can't find any reason. It's literally just sitting in Spokane, Washington. It's crazy. So if anybody's trying to figure out what's going on, C was nice enough to get one of the Kaylee posters that and Steve Gonzalez was hanging up for Kaylee J Day. And she had got one because she lives in and around that area, and actually, I think, got hers from the family. What I wanted to do was get that original poster, and I was going to frame it and put it up on my wall. Well, she sent two of them. I think one got sent back to her. The second time she sent it out, it literally got sent out to Spokane, Washington, and it's been circulating in a post office, and they said that it will never get delivered. That was the answer they gave me. That's just unacceptable. It's crazy, but sucks. I really wanted it, and just couldn't make it happen, I guess. So, all right, we'll keep playing on here, but thank you so much. And if you ever want to reimburse for that postage, let me know. I'll just PayPal you the postage and get that back to you. Okay.
Tyrannosaurus Rex. This giant ogre is standing there, and and DA Ray Tierney's talking about that they caught him with a pizza, and they show a pizza box. I mean, so right away, both of us thought, could that be? You know, could it be him? It could be. I mean, I don't know if it is or not, but it's somebody that plans this really well. It was an intelligent, ugly, horrifying thing, and he makes this screechy noise too. This weird.
I think the best thing to do is get one of those tubes. I don't know if you sent it in a tube. Just get one of those poster tubes, and you would just roll it and put it in. That's probably the best way to send it. So, you know, if you want to try to reattempt again, if you can get one, that would be great. I'll definitely set you up with a postage. Let me know. Just email me. I will send you the address that it can be sent to again. And we'll get it, get it right this time. But if you want to send it, try sending it. It's literally circulating. Maybe you can make a call to them. It's in a Spokane, Washington post office. So if you have the tracking number, maybe you can give them a call. Yeah, or you can send it UPS. It'll definitely get here UPS or FedEx. And I promise you, just email me. I will PayPal you the postage to get it here. I'll reimburse you the postage that you tried to, get it here. I will pay you back. And even if I have to pay some additional postage, I'll send you like $40. Even if you have to FedEx it or UPS it, just let me know if you want to try to reattempt, and I'll get you the address again that you can send it to. Yeah. My mom's first name is Lauren, not Laura, by the way. It's Lauren, Lauren. You can send it to her address. Okay, we'll keep playing on here. But just email me, send me send me your PayPal, and I'll send you out like $40 because I don't want you to pay any more money for it. I feel bad. Okay, let's keep playing.
Kind of noise like that. It's a human voice making that noise. So, and it's long. The call is long. It's not 5 seconds. So somebody's thinking this up and doing it. For what reason? I have no idea, except in January, I was activating the examination of various witnesses in the case I have for Shannon Gilbert by taking their depositions. So things were moving again. And as soon as they moved, we got these calls.
So interesting and bizarre.
Just one last question. Have you had any calls since Rex Heuermann was arrested last Thursday?
Not really. We get calls all the time where people hang up. That you can't count. But I haven't had any of the calls like the ones that I just described since March.
It's crazy.
We did have a call
I hope that as you look into this,
at the office.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we had
recently
a call here, but not when before he got arrested, of course, where that screeching voice was called here at the office, and you could hear in the background. It was like people in a bar. But my whole family was here at the time the call was made. That happened twice, and both times the whole family was here at the office. So why did that happen? I don't know, but it was similar.
John, do me a favor as you continue to investigate this. And like I said, they have his cell phone records pretty extensively by now. If you discover that those calls were indeed from Rex Heuermann in your conversations with police, hopefully this case is still, open and active on their part, please let us know. It is chilling to hear that. And I'm sorry that you and your family have had to go through it. Thank you for being on tonight and telling the story.
All right. Oh, I got it that time. All right, let's hear from Brian Enton. And then what we are going to do is we're going to play through, we'll play through the press conferences today. We had the DA speak and then the defense attorney. So I want to play through that as well. Let's hear what Brian Enton had to say
better known
about
as
Rex Heuermann's wife the other day. In sheer depression, trauma.
Mrs. Rex Heuermann may have seen inside the family's ransacked home in Massapequa Park when she and the children returned there yesterday. Today, Ella Rupp told the Daily Mail, quote, "I got over the hurdle of what I saw inside." She offered no further explanation, but is also quoted as saying, "The sheer depression of what I saw was enough trauma." Whether she's talking about what was found inside her house or the condition of the house, the way it was left after the 12-day search by police, that part is still a mystery. I'm guessing it's just the fact that the house was so ransacked. But were there signs in that house that were missed by Heuermann's family all those years, or perhaps missed by neighbors? Joining me now is Dr. Carol Lieberman. She is a forensic psychiatrist who's provided expert witness testimony in high-profile murder cases, and also Lisa Rybakov, a polygraph expert and private investigator who's been following this case from the very beginning. Lisa and Carol, thank you so much for being with us. I want to start with you, Lisa. What do you make of Heuermann's wife's comments, the sheer depression of what I saw was enough trauma? What do you think she's talking about, Lisa?
I would hope that what she's discussing is pertaining to the trauma of going back to the only home that she's known since emigrating from Iceland, to the destruction and everything that was turned over while the executed search warrant was done. And again, with regards to search warrants, anything is fair game as long as it fits within the statutes of the search warrant. And we all know that the individuals that had executed the search warrant are not responsible for putting everything back where they found it. So I think a lot of it has to do with the turmoil pertaining to the condition of the house, maybe things that were broken that she did hold close and personal to her, maybe some childhood relics of her children were taken. So there could be a lot of family history that not only is destroyed because of the alleged actions of their father and husband, but also because of the execution of the search warrant.
Yeah, I just can't imagine what that family is going through. I really can't. And I cannot imagine what the inside of that house looked like. They were there for almost 2 weeks, going through everything. We saw what they did in the yard, digging up the yard. Imagine what they did in the house. It's hard to imagine what the family walked into. Carol, you say consistent observations of unusual behavior over time is the best indicator of whether or not a person is living a double life. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, in other words, there are a number of different signs that might make you or should make you suspicious that someone is a serial killer, but no one sign in particular. I mean, for example, the basic sign is that the person is odd. He doesn't seem to fit together, all his pieces, and doesn't seem to fit in the surroundings. And, you know, what's interesting is that when they've been talking to people in his school, all through his school years, and they talk about that he didn't seem to fit in, he was odd, and so on. Heuermann's wife is an enigma. I think she's very fascinating. You know, I don't think that she didn't know anything. I'm not saying that she knew that she had any evidence or that she knew specifically that he murdered these women, but they've been married for over 25 years. When couples are married and one of the people has an affair, the other person really knows deep down. They may not see any evidence, but they know that there's something going on. And so I think that she knew that there was a dark side to him and that there was something dark going on. But, you know, part of it is denial. She didn't want to know. And part of it is, and this is kind of interesting, that she was living in a fantasy world of her own. You know, she was very involved in comic books. She went to comic book conventions and so on. And she also gave herself a name for social media, Elven Maiden, which is a name from a fantasy video game. So it seems like she was just wrapped up in comics and video games and didn't want to see what was going on with her husband.
Yeah, I've wondered, you know, once all of this went down and he was arrested, does she then think back to times like, oh my gosh, I think this was weird, something maybe she didn't realize at the time, but now sort of makes sense. Lisa, what else do we know about her? I mean, Carol brought up the fact that she was a comic book fan and that she had this interesting social media presence, but do we know much else, what she did for a living or, you know, what her life was like?
The only information that we've been made part of the public is that she did maintain this comic book lifestyle. She did have this alternate sense of reality. And the first thing that I would think of as an investigator is that clearly she has some sort of internal trauma where she's creating a secondary lifestyle to almost...
I'm just going to answer this real quick. Caterbug says they better start looking in other sites, especially all of his land. I have a feeling that just started learning this man has many, many secrets. You know, I've said this all along, and I've been saying this for a while. I think that if Rex Heuermann is responsible for all of these women that they are saying that he's responsible for, I think this is going to be one of, if not the most prolific serial killers of all time. Because, you know, we talked about Vegas, we talked about his connections to South Carolina. He's very close to New Jersey. He's obviously in New York, Long Island. You know, we know what the connection is here with his victims. So this would be almost prime pickings in and around those areas as to, you know, just multiple victims that he may be involved in. And I have a feeling this is not just 13 years. This probably goes way back, deeper than this. So I just find it crazy that people are not as fascinated about this case as, for some reason, that Idaho case just grips everybody. And it's just so polarizing, where this case potentially could be bigger than Idaho. And I'm saying that respectively because, you know, they're both huge tragedies in every form. But the level of the investigation, the level of the evidence here is going to be mind-blowing when they start putting all of this together. And this may cross many state lines for years and years and years. You know, someone made a good point today. They said that I think the reason that the Idaho grips so many people is that, you know, they're young, they're college students. You know, this was done in the cloak of night. A knife was used. Allegedly, a knife was used. You know, allegedly, you have one perpetrator that did this, that snuck in the cloak of darkness. and then you have all of the drama that surrounded, you know, the fallout, you know, when he left, what the witness saw, you know, all of that, the piecing together all the information, the tons of misinformation that's out there. So there's not so many, I would say, like puzzle pieces in Gilgo, but kind of there really is. But I think people are able to kind of sort through all of what's going on here versus the mystery and the shroud that's going on in Idaho. So that could be it. You know, that could be it. That could be the reasons, but that's just, you know, my opinion. We'll keep playing through this here.
Suppress what she actually has going on in her day-to-day life, routines, family, interpersonal relationships. I mean, the only thing that we've seen and learned so far, or at least one of the main facts, is that she was going ahead and using food stamps to go ahead and purchase groceries. We don't know what the financial status is of the family itself, as well as their assets pertaining to properties, real estate, as well as their current financial standings. But for her to possibly be under financial control at the same time also creates a level of trauma where she doesn't have the capability of buying herself expenditures for her children or herself, or possibly living a lifestyle that she does see that her neighbors are also residing in.
Thank you for watching.
All right, that's Banfield. Okay, let's go over to Court TV. They talked yesterday about Heuermann's appearance in court, and then we're going to go to the DA and see what the DA had to say, and then we'll follow up with Rex Heuermann's defense attorney, and that should take us right out till the end of this podcast. All right, let's hear what Court TV had to say.
That front. And that front is the family, it's the job, it's the kids, it's the all-American look, right? But there's this dark side that he has.
How did he have all of these hidden deviancies that no one had discovered in all of these years? And he was able to just keep that completely on the side. And now we see these horrific internet searches and all of the things that are actually part of the evidence. And how was he able to hide that for so long? And was there at some point a form of escalation, or maybe a rapid unraveling of his mental state that people didn't catch?
And if they can track him, they can definitely find out that he didn't start in his late 40s, that he may have started in his 30s or in his 20s, depending on where he went to college, depending on where he was living, if he's living in an apartment, all those things they look into if they're actually going to get to the bottom of all the individuals he may have killed.
Of course, they're all talking about the accused Long Island serial killer scheduled to be in court early next week. Court TV legal correspondent Julie Janae has more tonight.
I like Vinny.
To announce the indictment of defendant Rex Andrew Heuermann, 59 years of age. He's been arrested by the Suffolk County Police Department's homicide detectives, and he's been indicted for the murders of Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello.
On July 13th, 2023, architect Rex Heuermann was arrested in connection with 3 of the Gilgo Beach murders and remains a prime suspect in the killing of Maureen Brainard Barnes. For more than a decade, the bodies unearthed on Gilgo Beach in New York terrified residents. 9 women, a man, and a toddler were discovered, and police believe Heuermann is connected to 4.
Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks among us, a predator that ruined families.
During a training exercise on December 11th, 2010, the remains of Melissa Bartholomew were discovered. 2 days later, the remains of Maureen, Megan, and Amber were all found. All 4 victims were petite females believed to be sex workers, missing clothes and bound in a similar fashion. They were killed by homicide. Before their disappearance, they had been contacted by a person using a burner phone.
For each of the murders, he got an individual burner phone, and he used that to communicate with the victims. Then shortly after the death of the victims,
they got video of
he
buying
then
the burner phone.
would get rid of the burner phone.
According to the phone records, investigators believed the serial killer lived in Massapequa Park and worked in Midtown Manhattan near Penn Station. They discovered Heuermann had access to several burner phones, and the calls were made inside what police called the box. Their suspect would also make sadistic calls near his office to the victims' families, with one particular call asking Barthelemy's teenage sister, quote, "Do you think you'll ever speak to her again?"
They had these phone records from day one. As you mentioned, they had the description of the guy, the car. They had all the information they needed.
A key detail in the investigation would be buried for years as a police chief was arrested for obstruction of justice. But in March of 2022, weeks after a new task force formed, an investigator found a witness description of a man matching Heuermann's characteristics at Amber Costello's home.
That individual was identified as a person who was between 6'4" and 6'6". A large man. Also of significance was the fact that he was driving a dark-colored, black, first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche.
Investigators would later find Heuermann's Chevy Avalanche in South Carolina.
One of the things that we did is we followed him because we wanted to get an abandonment sample of his DNA.
Investigators collected Heuermann's DNA from a discarded pizza crust and linked him to a hair found on a burlap covering Megan Waterman's remains. The investigation continues with the search of Heuermann's home and the possibility of other murder charges. He claims he is innocent and has an attorney who says he did not commit these murders.
In terms of speaking to my client, the only thing I can tell you that he did say as he was in tears was, "I didn't do this."
So what is this trial going to look like? What is this defense going to be? Bernardo Villalona, let's start with the trial. What do you think this trial looks like?
This trial is going to be a media circus, Vinny. I can tell you probably at every court hearing that takes place having to deal with Rex Heuermann, that is going to be packed with media present. I'm hoping that whoever the judge that is assigned to this case will allow cameras in the courtroom so it can be televised, this trial, because it's important not just to those family members of those that were found and those bodies that were found in Long Island, but also to that community and people here in New York and just all over that were scared for many years, thinking of, is there a serial killer? Is this serial killer the person that's next to me? And finally, he has been apprehended. But it's definitely going to be a media circus. In terms of what his defense is going to be, hey, it wasn't me.
It wasn't me. It was somebody else, right? Ben, how do you think both sides should prepare for all of this? Because as Bernard has said, I mean, we've got a hearing coming up next week. Every time something's happening in court, everyone's going to be there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. It sounds like from what we've heard that there isn't an enormous amount of forensic evidence. So I think his counsel may focus on the lack of actual evidence linking him to these horrendous murders.
Brian Watkins, unbelievable, right? A New York serial killer, and we're solving the case with the pizza crust. And I don't even know if it's New York style. It looks a little thick from here.
It is a circumstantial case, but here's the problem for the defense with a circumstantial case like this. When you got a lot of circumstantial evidence, it puts the ball in the defendant's court to explain that stuff. Why is a hair fiber DNA on this blanket with this buried girl? Why is all this crazy porn stuff on your internet? Why are you researching this killing of these girls that we're charging you with? Why that was such an interest to you that you're doing Google searches for it? He needs to explain that stuff. It will not be enough for him to get up there and just say, whatever the prosecution just told you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that's not enough. I didn't do it. That's not going to work. He's going to need to get up on that stand and explain that stuff. And if he can't do it, he's done because he's already not likable.
Bernardo, under New York law, do you think he'll be able to be tried as a serial killer and not break this up into separate trials so the jury has blinders on and doesn't know the full picture?
So, Vinny, he is going to be tried as a serial killer. The name of the charge is not serial killer. It's actually murder in the first degree. So in New York, murder in the first degree, by definition alone, if a person kills 2 or more people in different transactions within 24-month period with a similar common plan or scheme, then those homicides can be tried together. So the law itself is going to allow for these 3 homicides to be tried in front of the same jury. And that's why it makes a huge difference that he was charged as a serial killer under the same common scheme that was found with the different bodies, because it's now going to be separated. So we're looking forward to this trial. Even though he's charged with murder in the first degree, just remember the most he's going to face is life without the possibility of parole.
All right. Okay, let's hear from the DA. The DA had a press conference this morning or this afternoon. Let's hear that.
This is breaking news.
In New York State, we have a very extensive discovery statute, which we are endeavoring to comply with the work of both the court and defense counsel. This is a 13-year case, so as you saw, we have a great deal of information, evidence, photographs, reports to provide to the defense counsel. We've begun that process. I think it was 8 gigabytes of material, which is a tremendous amount. And that's just...
Again, for everybody, if you're just joining in the chat, okay? So Long Island serial killer case, 13-year span, 8 terabytes of information or evidence were turned over. 8 terabytes. Okay. I said earlier, what can, and I'll show you again. Let me get the photo or the clipping. I think I still have it up. All right. Let me show you. So 8 terabytes. Okay. 8 terabytes of information were given over in this case. I asked Google, is a 5 terabyte a lot of storage, expansive storage space? A 5 terabyte hard drive can hold up to an estimated 83,000 MP3 music files, 1,250 feature-length movies, or 160,000 digital photos, which is ample storage for most average users. I'll give you another perspective. On my 8 terabyte hard drive, I have 3 years of YouTube footage on there, thousands of videos, thousands of pictures, thousands of whatever on there. And I've probably only filled up 2 or 3 terabytes. For all you that just came in, maybe you can answer this question. How many terabytes of evidence are there in the Brian Kohberger case? Type it in the chat. How many terabytes in the Brian Kohberger case? How many terabytes in the Brian Kohberger? Yes, 51. 51. And this was 13 years, and there's only 8 terabytes. 51 terabytes. So when you think that we've seen all of the evidence in the Idaho case, I got news for you. We haven't even seen 1 to 5% of it yet. So that gives you perspective. If anybody's doubting the evidence in the Idaho case, look how much they already have on Rex Heuermann. So if you're doubting evidence in Idaho, 51 terabytes. That's a lot of information. That's a lot of information. A lot of information. I'm glad that people can see this, because this is what I wanted to talk about this evening. It's really what I wanted the theme of the show to be. Because when I saw that in the article, it was like only 8 terabytes for 13 years of an investigation. Holy smokes. That's, times 5 times what? It's like 7 times over in Idaho. It's crazy. All right, let's bring this back up and keep playing through the DA.
At the beginning, we're going to continue to do that on a rolling basis. And, this case, the charges in the indictment are just allegations. So this is the first step in the process of proving those allegations. So we look forward to undertaking that process. We've spoken to the victims. The victims are not going to be making any. They've elected not to make any statements at this to the media at this time. They want to maintain their privacy. They are obviously interested in the case, but they're not going to be speaking to the media. So that's about it. So, as you can imagine, it's a very personal, thing for the victims' families. So we're going to support the victims' families.
Excuse me.
They make the decision as to what they do, where they go, who they speak with. So I would never speak for the attorneys. I'm sorry, the victims' families, other than to say, we're going to support them in whatever it is that they want to do.
Are you aware if they were here today?
There were some victims. There were some victims who were family members of the victims who were here today. I'm not going to discuss that. So there's just certain conditions with regard to the disclosure of materials, and that's something that was worked out between the court, defense counsel, and ourselves, and that's standard procedure. It's under seal. I'm sorry? You're talking about 13 years worth of investigation. So it is, I'm not going to speak for defense counsel, but suffice to say, it is a massive amount of material.
There you go, right
don't
there.
Forget it's continuing because the investigation is.
I'm gonna go back and rewind that so everybody can hear it again. Let's hear what the DA had to say about the massive amount of information they have.
Not going to speak for defense counsel, but suffice to say, it is a massive amount of material. And don't forget, it's continuing because the investigation is continuing. So we're talking about a massive amount of material.
So if anyone is doubting evidence in Idaho, 51 terabytes versus 8 terabytes of information or evidence, evidence and information over a 13-year span in the Long Island serial killer case. That is the perspective that I'm trying to get everybody to realize here. So if you're saying they don't have anything on Koberger, I'm telling you, 51 terabytes is a hell of a lot of information.
We receive tips on, in all cases at all times. We take those serious and we work through them, but we maintain the confidentiality of the investigation up until the time we can bring charges. It was basically what I just elicited, what I just spoke to you all about, which was the discovery schedule and the manner in which we were going to get this massive amount of discovery over to the defense. It has to be done in a way that makes sense for the defense, but also makes sense for us as well, so they can understand what they get, and we're able to catalog and identify, what exactly it is we provided.
Last time you said that you had some case. Last time you said that it was some stories about the DNA for the 4 victims. Is already progress about that?
So the investigation is continuing, but once that investigation is concluded, we'll have more to say. But that investigation is ongoing.
Last week, you said the scores of evidence gathered at the Massapequa Park home would take time to sift through. How much of what was handed over today is from last week's search? Was placed on the record, specifically what we turned over, which is part of the court record. I don't think anything specifically from the recent searches has been turned over. There are some reports that Heuermann's soon-to-be ex-wife is upset at the way the house was effectively turned upside down. She
might try to bring forward a case. What's your response to that?
She could pursue whatever remedies she feels are necessary.
If things are proceeding as they have been, do you anticipate a trial? You do not anticipate a plea deal?
I don't anticipate anything. I anticipate that we have to show up every day. We have to comply with our discovery requirements, and we'll negotiate the case in good faith with the court and defense counsel and see how it plays out, just like any other case.
What's it like for you as DA leading this case?
I've led many cases. Last one being in 2019. So this is what we do as prosecutors.
Is it imminent that you might go before the grand jury to seek additional charges in this case?
As we've said, we've worked through the grand jury process. That grand jury process is continuing. The good thing about the grand jury process is we can subpoena witnesses and evidence, but it's also secret. So we'll maintain the secrecy of that grand jury until the grand jury has acted.
When is your term up?
We're not going to discuss specific terms with regard to this or any other grand jury.
What happens next on September 27th? What needs to happen between now and then?
So what needs to happen between now and then, we need to continue to comply with the discovery requirements. We're working with the court. We're working with defense counsel. That discovery is going to be going out on a rolling basis. And as was indicated in court, it's a tremendous amount of material. So we're going to continue to provide that. Obviously, the defense is going to need time to digest all of that which we're giving.
Do you anticipate a date for the end of discovery?
It's going to take a while, and we just need to be productive, and that's something that we'll work out with regard to both the court and counsel.
When we spoke at the home, you said nothing jumped out initially from what you took from the home. Has that changed?
So when I say nothing jumps out, I mean, you wait until all the facts are in, and then you draw conclusions from those facts. So we still have to continue to wait for all of that, and not only the cataloging of the evidence, but all of the testing, including forensic testing, to get done, which unfortunately, unlike sometimes on TV, it just doesn't happen overnight.
How long does forensic testing take?
It varies. It depends upon what you're talking about. Is it DNA? Is it some other analysis? Is it mitochondrial DNA? Is it nuclear DNA? So it's very, it's dependent upon the facts and circumstances of each individual piece of evidence. So we just have to wait for the process to play out.
At least months,
It's certainly weeks.
Some of the DNA evidence is, well, all of it is over a decade old. How confident are you of the methods the lab is using? Some of it untested, some of it more modern, in being clear.
Extremely confident. It's all been tested. It's all been deemed admissible in courts of law across the United States. So we're confident in our science.
And as far as the victims go, how many families were here to support? Were they here supporting 3 of the victims? How many different families are we talking about?
So that's a tough question to answer, because I think there are people who are physically here. I can tell you that we have a great dialogue with all the victims' families, and they're all supporting in one way or the other. So I'm not going to get into specifics with specifically who's here and who's not here. But what I will say is the victims' families are interested and engaged. So what we've said is a rolling basis, and what that essentially means is when you're talking about this massive amount of
he's a DA.
material, we're just basically starting and then culling the material, providing it, and then sort of repeating the process. But there's it's a massive amount of material.
Can you say anything about the fourth victim? Are you close to filing charges in that case?
The investigation with regard to all of the remaining bodies on Gilgo is continuing.
Is the wife cooperating with the court process?
We don't speak about anyone who talks to us with regard to our investigations. We maintain the confidentiality of anyone who may or may not be talking to us.
The wife said that her home and her life is in turmoil, specifically after the investigation of her home. Do you have any comment to her or to that?
Nope.
How many victims have family representatives here? Just the number.
So I'm not gonna speak for the victims. The victims are they'll speak for themselves.
What's your names? Just how many?
I'm not gonna
More than one.
more than one, but I'm not gonna talk specifically about the victims.
Surveillance video just help explain what that is in reference to?
I mean, I believe some of that video pertains to the motel that Ms. Waterman was staying at shortly before her disappearance.
Could you tell us what will happen on the 27th?
Basically, what happened here, it's just a repeat. There'll be, obviously the defense will have the opportunity to provide, to go through what we've provided. We're going to be continuing to provide on a rolling basis. So it'll be just the opportunity for us to continue the process with defense counsel, as well as being able to inform the court of our progress and the status of the case. Okay.
Did the families make any request of you, or you give any message to them that you can talk about?
The families have opted not to speak at this time, and I certainly respect that. And again, we don't dictate to our victims any particular message that they should or shouldn't be giving. So I think that's it. But thanks all for coming, and we'll see you back on the 27th. Thanks.
All right, that is the DA. Let's hear from the defense attorney. The defense attorney. Here we go.
All right, folks. So I hopefully answer some of your questions. I don't know much.
Can you move over to the right?
Microphones.
Sure. Today we had our first conference on the case. Conference with the judge in the back. The district attorney provided us with apparently 8 terabytes of discovery, which we're obviously going to go through with fine detail over the coming months.
Okay, there it is. 8 terabytes again. 8 terabytes, and I know I'm repeating this and beating this to death, but I'm just trying to get everybody to understand. 8 terabytes of digital evidence was collected over a 13-year period in the Long Island serial killer case that was turned over today as discovery. 13 years. In the Brian Kohberger case, there were 51 terabytes turned over. So if you're thinking there's a lack of evidence in the Brian Kohberger case, I got news for you. You haven't even seen nothing yet. You haven't even seen nothing yet. And that's why I think that Ann Taylor is delaying a lot and putting all these motions to slow everything down, to slow down the clock. They're not going to be able to go through that in a quick process, believe me. And I was telling everybody earlier, if you're just listening in, I have an 8 terabyte hard drive here. I have 3 years worth of YouTube footage on this terabyte, on this hard drive. And I've probably only used maybe 2 terabytes on here, if that. It's crazy. So 8 terabytes here, 13-year investigation. Idaho murder is probably a few months of investigating, and there's 51 terabytes of digital evidence. It's just a lot of evidence to go through.
I understand there's going to be more discovery forthcoming, and we have a new court date of September 27th. That's the next scheduled court date. And again, it's going to be a conference date, and we'll update the judge on where we're at. So if I can answer some questions, I'll do my best. Well, he's incarcerated. He's a man who's never been arrested before. He's maintained his innocence from the inception of this case. So he's doing the best he can at this point in time. He's looking forward to having his day in court.
He was looking over
What kind of thoughts is he sharing with you?
Family?
I didn't see him with no.
Do you know if he's had any contact with his family?
Sure, he's had contact with his wife, yes.
Has she visited?
Family members. I don't think she's visited yet, obviously, because she doesn't want to be ambushed by the press. So she hasn't visited him.
She spoke to the press in her house.
Do you have any questions about the case? I'm happy to answer.
Oh.
He has, and I'm not representing him on that, so I can't really discuss anything about his divorce.
Last time you said he was emotional.
He was emotional
about the charges. Has it settled in? Has there been any change in his emotion since?
Well, now that when I've been meeting with him at the jail, obviously we're talking about substance as opposed to the initial shock. So now it's really gearing up towards the defense of this case.
Does she support her husband? Does she support her husband? Does she believe he's innocent?
You're going to have to talk to her. I don't know. I haven't spoken to her.
You looked at
Mr.
Ernie
Brown.
has spoken extensively about his case in the public. How do you view that? Do you have concerns about him possibly affecting a possible jury down the road?
Yeah, I'm not I'm not trying this case in the press. This case is a case that we're going to try in the courtroom. The press has convicted my client without seeing a shred of evidence. So he doesn't stand a chance with the press. And we're not going to try the case in the press. I doubt that any one of you for a moment have even contemplated the possibility that they have the wrong guy. So what we're going to do is we're going to defend this case in a courtroom. In the courtroom we just were in, where we have 12 fair and impartial jurors, where we have a fair and impartial judge, where words like presumption of innocence and beyond a reasonable doubt, where words like that reign every day. That's where we're going to try this case. So we're not going to try it in the press. We're going to do our due diligence. We're going to defend this case in a court of law.
Do you feel like police and authorities have the wrong guy?
All I can say is he's presumed innocent. There have been hundreds, if not thousands, of leads in this case, and we haven't even seen them yet. I know about these leads from you folks who have reported these leads for the last 10 years, 12 years. So the answer is they very well could have the wrong guy.
How do you explain the DNA link to Heuermann's wife, the Google searches, and the cell phone locating data?
Have you seen the DNA yet?
Oh.
I'm asking you, have you?
What the prosecution says links your client to these.
I haven't seen anything. Have you seen anything?
Well, I'm asking how you, as his
This
lawyer,
guy's awesome.
explain what the DA describes as voluminous amounts of
The government is looking to convict my client. I haven't seen anything. So I can't sit here and defend DNA and recovery of evidence and things that they claim they have until I see it. I haven't seen anything. So I'm not going to, at this point in time, I can't tell you what defects, if any, are in any of their evidence because I haven't seen it. What has your client told you?
Bocce balls.
He told me he didn't do this.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, well, we're obviously, the district attorney's office has a whole office. They're the biggest law firm in this county. I'm one guy, right? So Ms. Koish is going to be co-counsel on this. We have other attorneys that I expect, excuse me, are going to be assisting on this.
Is he a public defender? Does anybody know if this guy's a public defender or if, let's see. Is he a public defender or a hired attorney? Does anybody know?
Just to pour through the discovery is an enormous task, but we're prepared for it. And we're going to do it. And whether it's a year and a half or 2 years, whenever that day comes, we're going to go in a court of law, and we're looking forward to defending this.
Do you think?
For quite a bit talking about the discovery process, and you heard obviously everything that's in your hands now. I mean, just can you give a sense of the amount of evidence that you have in your hands now?
So what I was provided to.
Okay, thank you, Shell.
Is what, and I'm not.
Thank you, Cindy.
8 terabytes of information. So I was told that a gigabyte is 6,000 pages, and I was
1 gigabyte is 6,000 pages. 1 gigabyte. I'm telling you, there's a lot of evidence in the Koberger case.
told that there's 1,000 gigabytes in a terabyte. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, it's enormous.
So this gives you some perspective.
Of course. I plan on going through it as soon as I get back to my office.
Oh.
Do you think you could have a fair trial here in Suffolk County, or are you considering moving it?
Well, that's obviously something we're going to look into in terms of change of venue. Unfortunately, or fortunately, you have the press reporting things to the public. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's skewed. So now you have the people in Suffolk County who are going to be sitting on the jury. We only hope that they will be fair and impartial, that they won't be influenced by the members of the press, and that they can listen to the evidence and decide for themselves if they have the right guy.
How quickly will you be sitting?
Oh,
Archie
balls.
But what we were doing is discussing receiving of evidence, how it's going to be transported to our office, and how it's going to be coming in the future. Again, this is a significant case, so it's not like it takes a minute or two. There's a lot involved in receiving discovery. I'll take up anybody's offer to help assist on this case.
Do you expect another indictment against your client?
You'd have to ask the district attorney. I don't know the answer to that.
It's been reported he's been on suicide watch. Is there concern?
There is none. So what happens with suicide watch is the jail customarily, as a matter of course, when they have an inmate coming in, put somebody on suicide watch. So they have a mental evaluation, and there's been no indication that he has in any way indicated a suicidal tendency. That's just pro forma.
And Rex wants to go to trial. He's not interested in a plea deal of any kind.
There's no plea deal. He said from the moment I met him that I did not do this. So we're prepared to go forward, defend this case in a court of law, and we will go to trial on this case.
So he's feeling charges for child sexual.
Let's just say numerous.
So he is feeling hopeful.
He's feeling hopeful about what?
Hopeful that he's going to be proven.
He doesn't have to be proven innocent. The burden on this case is on the district attorney or the government. They have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt.
How do you explain the charges that he was Googling child sexual material?
I don't know what kind of evidence they have. Again, that's the district attorney who has the obligation, and they're the ones who are going to provide us with discovery. So I don't know what type of evidence they have. I haven't even seen their evidence, so I can't even tell you what, if anything, we will do. It's too premature.
You've seen that release. You said that he was Googling explicit material related to children. What does your client say about that?
Have you seen that yet? Do you believe everything the government says? I don't. So I understand that the government has told you certain things. I don't believe everything the government says. So I'm going to wait until I get the evidence. I'm going to look at the evidence. We're going to examine the evidence, and we're going to move forward from there.
Nah, you're right, bro.
Two more questions. Ms. Koish is on this matter. Mr. Russo is on this matter, and we have 3 or 4 other attorneys
I'm tired.
that are now going to start the process of reviewing discovery.
So you believe the government is plotting against your client?
I didn't say that.
Fabricated these searches?
I didn't say that.
Then
I can tell you from.
believe the government.
I can tell you. Well, I've been doing this for 30 years. The government makes allegations all the time. Sometimes the allegations are true. Sometimes they're not true. Sometimes when they accuse somebody of committing a crime, that person is innocent. Sometimes when they accuse somebody of committing a crime, that person is innocent. So I don't know what is to bear.
Machi balls.
He needs to get the presumption of innocence.
Right, but you've seen the bail application that shows that these searches were made on murder phones that were linked to Heuermann. So
Sorry?
You have seen that evidence.
I haven't seen, I'll repeat it again.
Oh.
I have not seen 1 ounce of evidence on this case. Today in court,
Yes.
the first time I was handed anything, and it's in the form of terabytes. I can't read a terabyte with my hands or my eyes, so we have to download that and start the process.
Are you going to bail at all this thing?
What I'll say is this, down the road, if certain things come to fruition and come to light that I think would warrant a change in his custody status, we will certainly make that application to the judge. Well, at this point, it would be silly for me because we don't have any. I haven't seen it.
Are you comfortable with the list of evidence provided to you as described today, and why or why not?
I haven't even looked at it.
But as
Oh.
described or listed today.
So what was described and listed is I got 5 vanilla envelopes, and they have a terabyte, 2 terabytes each. I don't. That's all I have.
Do you know are there thumb drives inside, or are you getting hard copies?
They're big black terabytes. You know what? I don't know. I think they're hard drives, right? Is that what you call them? Hard drives. So that's what I got. I got 5 hard drives that was handed to me 30 minutes ago. Okay.
And you have them in your briefcase now?
I have them right here.
How involved is Heuermann with his defense so far?
He is an involved, obviously interested party who's going to be a big part of assisting us in the defense of this case. All right, guys. Thanks very much.
All right, that's it. Since I just had a bunch of people show up, I'm going to hang out for another 5 minutes or so. Let's hear more about the 5 terabytes of evidence in this case. 5 terabytes. All right, let's play. Whoa, we get some
New
sound.
York is our own Court TV
Court
crime
TV.
and justice correspondent, Matt Johnson. Matt, I've been itching to talk to you because I know that you were inside with the alleged serial killer during the hearing. Tell us what happened.
Well, at one point, Judge Ashley, he cocked his head back and glanced right at the media that was seated in the front couple rows, including myself, and he gave us all a glance. And then he looked back at his attorneys and he walked out. He looked disheveled today. He towered over any law enforcement that surrounded the walls of that tiny courtroom. He walked in, his arms were crossed, he had handcuffs on, he had no tie, a blue shirt, and khaki pants. And he didn't say much. He whispered to his attorney, that attorney that you just heard from there, Mr. Brown, a couple times during the hearing. This hearing was pretty standard. It was about discovery, the state turning over on the record all of the discovery in this case, which included all of those terabytes that this attorney, this defense attorney, says he will start going over right now, immediately. He tells us that Rex Heuermann has been very active in his own defense and to this day still maintains the fact that he is innocent. And even though his status hasn't changed, no bond and still on a suicide watch at the county jail connected to this courthouse that I'm standing in front of, he says that his client is not suicidal. Judge Ashley?
All right, so let's talk a little more about inside the courtroom because, you know, we all have read that Rex Heuermann was married with children who lived in the home with him. Did any of those individuals show up today or anyone show up to support him in court?
And we have met those children and also his wife, estranged wife, that 1 week after these murder charges were filed, she filed for divorce. She's waved to our cameras, she has spoken to the media, and she's broken her silence by way of her attorney. Take a listen.
She had no idea any of this was going on or the allegations were even her husband was a suspect. She's not a suspect. She has not been questioned by the police regarding any of this. It's been extremely overwhelming for her and the children trying to piece life back together with what it was 2.5 weeks ago. I don't know if they're ever going to return to normalcy, but day by day, she's getting better. She needs to show her strength so her children have something to focus on, a strong focal point of their mom being in charge and everything. And she's getting better each day. It's been extremely overwhelming for her and her two children. As you can imagine, it attracts, for lack of a better word, fans from all across the spectrum just to get a glimpse of what's going on at the house, what's going on with her, the children. It's been chaotic.
Diego, nice. Never been there before.
Asa Ellerup is her name. Again, estranged wife of the suspected Long Island serial killer. She says that she had no idea. She said that police, after the 2 weeks long investigation into her home, left the place a mess. She's worried about her neighbors, and she released a statement about that to leave them alone as well. She's currently living in the home, and she was not near the courthouse today.
Matt, look at all those cars outside of that home. We know they had a search warrant they executed, but I'm sure people are wondering what's been going on inside that home. Speaking of the neighborhood, tell us more about the community and what that community is saying.
Right. In that community, it's a tight-knit community. It's a sleeper town, a village of sorts here in the Long Island area. A lot of retirees, a lot of multi-generational households, a lot of police officers and school teachers. Everybody knew about this case long before their neighbor was charged. They are still in shock right now. And actually, you know, a lot of people still visit the home just to see for themselves as they're in disbelief. Take a listen.
I just question whether, like, the family, like, had a suspicion of it. Just, like, I know that it's different because, you know, the wife and the kids grew to, like, love him. They were in their lives for the longest time, like, obviously. But I just question, like, being so close. Like, do you see those things? Like, do you catch on? Like, because that's scary. Like, if you don't catch on to those things being so close, it's like that could happen to anyone.
Rex Heuermann facing charges in the deaths of 3 women of the 11 that were found in that Gilgo Beach area, and pending charges right now with a 4th woman who was found dead and her remains. No additional charges were filed today.
All right. 8 terabytes. 8 terabytes. Only 8 terabytes. Still a lot of information. That's still a lot of digital evidence. So let's compare it again. 8 terabytes, 13-year investigation, 51 terabytes in the Brian Koberger, Idaho case in under a few months of investigating. That should give you some perspective of the amount of evidence that they have in the Idaho case. If anybody's doubting evidence, They got a lot of evidence. I do have that passion and that drive. I want to get to 10,000 subscribers. Damn it. So, you know, just to catch everybody up really quick, as I've had some new subscribers come into the channel, obviously over the last like 48 hours, I did my Paparaja video went crazy. I have like 12,000 views on it, brought in like over 100 new subscribers to the channel. Just to get this clear out there before I end the show tonight. So the way that my channel runs is that I do my podcasts live. I will download them and re-upload them a few days later for a replay. And there's a couple of reasons why I do that. After a while, if one of these streams don't continue in the algorithm and no one's clicking on it, it becomes kind of a dead video. It just becomes kind of a placeholder. So that won't bring in new people. So if I download the episode, re-upload it, and send it back out for a replay, that'll go out to new people. So I've seen some people like, oh, not another replay, another replay, another replay. I'm not saying you all in the room because you guys get it. But it's double dipping I call it double dipping the algorithm. And number two, I don't have time to make short form content. But what I'm going to try to do is, you know, still re-upload the episodes. You'll probably see some clips out of those episodes when I hit on some key points, and I'll probably start popping that up. The Coffin Daffer interview, I literally cut up almost every question, and I'm going to blast it out there over the next week. So, you know, I appreciate it. Go over there, just click on that video for a little bit, give it a like, comment, whatever. Just get some action on those videos to keep pushing it out. Right now, my subscriber count is 8,259. You know, we still have some work to get to 10,000. But once we get to 10,000, I think the channel is going to really start moving because I think YouTube's going to start seeing it. Not saying that I'm not credible now, but I think it's going to see it more of a, you know, a credible channel and start really pushing this hard. So I'm going to keep working hard, trying to do this. I'm giving myself a year from today, that hopefully that this channel blows up enough that I don't have to work for a corporate job ever again, and that I can sustain a life here. And I have some things in the works. I have some plans. I've had some thoughts. You know, we'll go from there. But that's my dream. It's my dream to do this for the rest of my life.